Well, first of all,
and this is on the basis of, remember the tweet that said this is an abomination?
Yeah.
Especially the one who was handshaking. Fortunately, the one who was shaking hands was the Swedish ambassador, not the German ambassador.
Yeah. First of all, I think it was a huge mistake on the part of the people who organized that meeting to have such a discussion in such a casual manner and allow Andrew to walk in from jump and take over the discussion. From what I understand, he walked in, I think about 20 minutes when the meeting had gone in, and true to Andrew, he will make his views known in a very loud way. It was a big mistake. You do not conduct diplomatic relations in such a manner. To have an honest conversation with the host country, you need to create an atmosphere where there's some confidentiality for diplomats to speak freely. And so I think, first of all, watching what I saw on social media, it was a huge mistake. It just represents how casual we are with many things. And if you've been to Gulu and gone to see Saleh, you can understand that he's a very casual character. And I think he's not bothered by such etiquette. That's why we are here. Because on so many occasions, I've sat in some meetings, closed-door confidential meetings between diplomats and government of Uganda, where frank discussions are held. They should never have allowed that to happen. It's a mistake. And I'm told that the mistake was to allow the press to come into the meeting before the meeting started. The idea was then that they would get out, they would then have their discussions, and then they would brief the press later. That's why diplomats issue what you call a communique. That's not how you conduct diplomacy. That's not how you conduct the business of states. That you allow somebody who was doing something else, like Andrew has said, he was taking some old man to see General Saleh, and then he saw a meeting and he just walked in and he was allowed to say what he wanted to say. That's number one. Number two, the main contestation with people who oppose Andrew Mwenda's arguments is that he is selectively and deceptively citing principles of international law to talk about equality of states. They have a problem if the intervention by foreign governments seek to hold them to account, but they have no problem if they intervene to promote their interest. And that's the deception that Ugandans, I think, are mad about. That they can come here and dictate to us our HIV/AIDS intervention approach through PEDFAR, and we have no problem with it. They can come here and fund 96% of our ARV intervention through USAID, and we have no problems with it. They can fund and finance the UPDF to go to Somalia to fight the Al-Shabaab, and they have no problems with it. Each soldier who has died in Somalia is compensated by the European Union, and those figures sit somewhere in a university in Sweden. So that is the point. The second thing is that to use it to deflect genuine concerns about human rights, the arguments may be sound, the argument may be intellectually sound and grounded, but that you use it when it is raised in a concern about human rights. I can tell you, I read the briefings on the human rights situation in Uganda. The ambassadors were not just concerned about Eddie Mutwe. They used that case because it was an example of the most blatant abuse of power by the army and the army commander. But there were several other cases of human rights violations raised by the ambassadors as a concern. The third thing is this, that international law is more convoluted than just the simple concept of state sovereignty. You have, for instance, the principle of what you call the right to protect. That if you are violating human rights in such an egregious manner, the rest of the international community have a duty, have a right to intervene to protect violations of human rights. This is not a Western idea. This is a General Assembly resolution. on the 20th of December in 1993. All member states of the UN agreed to these principles. Admittedly, the principles have been abused to intervene in some cases, but that they have a right to do so. To put it in local terms, Timothy, is that if I am your neighbor and I pay for the detergent, soap and water in your house, I have a right to complain if your spouse doesn't shower. Because I pay for it. You know, why should I pay for it? Or if I see you beating your child in the neighborhood, I have a right to say, no, please don't do that. So whilst Ugandans have an inherent right to take charge of their country and responsibility to lead it where they want it to go, we also have a duty as members of the international community to accept that certain responsibilities can be borne by external actors, regardless of who those external actors are. And I can tell you there's robust debates about the war happening in Gaza right now. You've heard about campus protests in the US. You've heard about the boycott of certain businesses by people who oppose the war. So there's a robust debate. The fact that Uganda is not pointing out the US for its role in that war, or the Germans for its role, does not negate the fact that there is actually an active debate about it. It's just because we feel, or because we are in fact, in terms of geopolitics, vastly inferior and incapable of actively participating in that debate. But it doesn't remove the fact that there is actually an active debate. The last point to make is this, that diplomatic relations between states are handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Exactly.
Not by the diminutive army spokesperson, Chris Magezi.
And that's what I want to ask you.
It is bringing village attitudes to international.
We're going to come to that one. But I need to ask, General Saleh is the chief coordinator of Operation Wealth Creation, senior presidential advisor on defense. This kind of conversation, do we have a parallel government that runs the foreign affairs? Because how does a whole 10 EU delegation go up to discuss such patent issues in such a casual way, like you say? So
first of all, anybody who knows how the Ugandan state has been working, General Saleh is the de facto deputy president. He does the pre-digesting for his brother.
Or co-president.
He's a co-president, whatever you call it. The set of power is there. Everybody, including Andrew here, has to go there every week. Ministers have. Nobody goes to Alupo because Alupo is in office, not in power. Power resides in Gulu. General Saleh does the pre-digesting for his brother, who is now aging and I think has lost some of his mojo. Everything happens in Gulu. And so everybody who goes to Gulu, ministers before appointments, permanent secretaries before appointments, make their way to Gulu. Gulu has become the center of power. And so the vice president might be the vice president, but really she's in office, not in power. Power resides in Gulu. The informality of the state is such that General Saleh is the co-president. The second thing is this, that if you are in that area and you're any person of some repute, the hangers on will hound you to go and see him. If a person as small as me has been receiving a lot of requests and calls when I'm in Gulu to go and see General Saleh, can you imagine if the entire ambassador corps of the EU arrive in Gulu to visit projects that they are funding? They were not in Gulu for a casual tour. They were visiting projects they were funding, and they are in billions of shillings. And normally the practice is when you're in Gulu, you see the co-president or the deputy president in Gulu, and that is what has happened. That's how we have run the Ugandan state. And the last thing to say is this: you begin to see the problem of the informality of the state, that the president's son and the army commander thinks that he can now engage in diplomatic relations with foreign governments and even severe ties. Relations between states are handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not by Chris Magezi announcing. In doing so, they've done two things. First, you are revealing things that Ugandan people didn't even know. The question then is, what kind of intelligence cooperation existed between Germany and the UPDF? Many people didn't know. Now we are asking questions. What do they actually provide? You know, we now need to know. They have now let the cat out of the bag. The last thing is this,
Yes.
that you must understand the economic relation between Germany and Uganda. The Germans run the largest coffee farm in the entire African continent. Here in Mubende, Kaweri Coffee is owned by Newman Coffee, the biggest coffee company in Germany. It's the largest plantation owned by foreigners on the African continent. The trade volumes for coffee, Germany is one of the highest importers of Ugandan coffee. Such reckless actions put in jeopardy those relations. The Germans are in charge of our security printing. With the government of Uganda have signed together a joint venture agreement and even formed a special purpose vehicle called Uganda Securities Printing Company Limited. They're in charge of printing security documents in this country. You're putting such things in jeopardy by reckless actions of the UPDF.